Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nate Meadows, head of marketing here at Opine. I'm really excited to be here with you today for another Fireside chat. I believe this is our fourth one this year. Each time they keep getting a little bit better and better. Fun guests, interesting topics, and I think you'll really enjoy today's topic. It's all about burnout, something that hopefully you haven't experienced, but more than likely you probably have had in some capacity or have seen someone gone through it. And we're really excited to share with you two special guests we'll bring on stage here in just a minute. But before we do, as always, I like to bring up the man we call Big Boss, the man himself, Akash, our CEO. Hey,
Oh my
Akash, welcome, my
gosh.
man.
Please never actually call me Big Boss.
All right. Well,
That is
yeah,
hilarious. Yeah.
behind your back, we do.
All right. Yeah, okay. I'm sure you do. Sure. Hey, everyone. It's great to have you. Really excited to introduce our panelists today. Excuse me. So Eric Reiners and Eric Special, both executives for career executive C-level. So Eric was the information officer at Rapid7. Eric Special was the chief customer officer at Rapid7 Zora and currently at Commerce Tools. And Eric Reiners is also the CEO of Be Well. So you're going to have a lot of great perspective on how to manage burnout from a cultural perspective, from individual perspective, from a leadership perspective. So really excited about today's talk. And I know it personally has affected me in the past as a startup founder, as like a consistent startup employee as well. So I'm sure it affects everyone. So yeah, let's get into it.
Absolutely. Let's bring him up. Before we do though, I will say this. Uh, I thought it would be really fun, as I said in the chat earlier. We want to make it really hard on ourselves. We thought we'd have two Erics, so we will be going by their last names, which I will probably mess up a few times. But without further ado, Specio, do you want to kick us off and introduce yourself? Then I'll turn it over to the winners.
Sounds good. And Nate Akash, thanks for the welcome here. So brief introduction. I am the Chief Customer Officer at Commerce Tools. This is a digital commerce platform for enterprise. And I lead a range of different functions here, mostly in the post-sales, right? So you're talking people who are customer success managers, people in services, people in support, all customer-facing roles. And I've done this for the past 20 plus years in various capacities, various countries, a tour in Asia for 8 years in both Japan and China, and in Europe for a while in France and covering the whole region. And now back in the US here. So pleasure to be here. And I have a background in engineering, which is kind of the heart of a lot of the things that I do. But yeah, I'll stop here for the intro, and I'm happy to be here and share some of our experiences and thoughts about this.
Awesome.
Over to you, Reiners.
Yeah. Thanks, Special. The other Eric on the call here. So yeah, I'm the founder of Be Well Innovation. Thank you for that kind introduction, Akash. And formerly a CIO of a public cybersecurity company. I've worked in cybersecurity for about 15 years and in B2B SaaS for about, I guess, 25 years now. So I'm dating myself a bit. I've worked in a lot of different roles, product management, engineering mostly, but also sales engineering, post-sales security consulting. And my last role was a CIO. So I've seen quite a bit of chronic stress. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. At Be Well Innovation, we train individuals and organizations on how to prevent burnout through energy, focus, and flow. So that's the primary focus I work on nowadays.
Awesome. I love that. So, all right, let's kick this topic off. We're just kind of, take it and see where it goes. But, Reiners, I'm curious from you, this is something that you're passionate about, obviously, and you are very, very well informed about this topic. But for everyone else, let's really kind of dial in a little bit. What is burnout and how should we define it?
Yeah, so we could talk first about the clinical definition, and that may be not the topic for today, but it's really around emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and the last part is a lack of personal accomplishment. So you work all week and you come home and you don't feel that sense of satisfaction. If you're experiencing things like that, it's time to probably talk to a professional. I think today we'll talk, Nate, more about the early signs of burnout and potentially the fatigue aspects, the decision fatigue, the cognitive overload that a lot of knowledge workers face. So I think that's kind of the area that we'll probably go into a little deeper.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to kind of say what burnout has meant to me, right, in like a much less like legitimate definition type of fashion. I know, like my first company, for example, was in AI as well, and for quantitative finance, we were building like deep learning at the time, and it was very much a grind, right? Educating the market, paving the way from the very much the ground, and a lot of cycles of just, wow, this is fruitless kind of effort, right? In the early days, especially. And so I think, just having that like lack of reward kind of for a lot of effort definitely just wears you down over time. And in customer facing roles, I've seen people experience it as well, because they're in a situation where the customers are just extremely demanding, and it's not something that they even have control over, right? They can put in all the effort in the world, but it's like a product issue. It's a capability that doesn't exist, or it's like a level of expectation that doesn't really match what reality is, and they're just mitigating a relationship, kind of turning into a punching bag. And anyway, that's kind of like been some experiences I've seen. So.
Yeah, no, that's good. And that's actually kind of where I wanted to head next, Akash, is really just sharing some personal experiences and some personal stories. I don't know, Special, if you want to chime in here.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit on this definition, right? This sense of never being done, and I can draw into certainly the first experiences I had in being an expatriate in Japan and leading a local team of engineers through I would call it hellish implementations, where to your point, customers are extremely demanding. You're never actually done, and there's no time for recovery, right? It's like one day after the next and the next and the next, and so I go back to these times. I'm like, there's probably a time where we were in that mode as a team, not seeing the end of anything in sight, not having milestones and not having any time for recovery. When you're like, these are the ingredients for that kind of burnout, either as an individual or as a team. And if I look at back as a manager of that team, I'm like, there were signs, right, that we were not set up for success, that we're not taking this in chunks that were manageable, and then celebrating, okay, this is the milestone, now we can go to the next. It was just one continuous push to the point of exhaustion, right? And so if you look back and you take a step back at any customer-facing role, especially in software and SaaS, where you have this incredible wall of demand coming at you, if you're in either in a delivery mode or in let's say tech sales, right, where it's like endless set of demos that you have to get done. The ability to, as a leader, to really pace this, is probably what was missing in that experience that I had in Japan, right? So yeah, I mean, I think we could all see a nod, and this is like, okay, but how do you do this right now? I don't know, Eric. I mean, you and I have led that same function, I think, in tech sales, right? And it's this sense of like, this will not stop. How do you get the teams to get into a mode like this?
Yeah, I had similar symptoms to both of what you described as well. So I've had, I think, 2 cases of burnout. It snuck up on me. One took about 4 months to recover, but it was very similar to what you described, Eric, where it's just a nonstop slog and with no rest. And then, Akash, like the incoming rate of issues, incidents, customer cases, escalations, that never seems to end, and it's very reactive. And so you don't get the time to pause and recover correctly. But it sneaks up in you, and it's really subtle, actually. Sometimes you don't notice it until it's too late. And yeah, I've had 2 cases where I believe I was really close to physical exhaustion, and didn't have the right skills at the time to kind of get out of it.
What do you mean by physical exhaustion?
Yeah.
My HRV was collapsing. My resting heart rate was really high. I was fatigued even after a good night's sleep. So I'd wake up fatigued and have this kind of dread, this feeling, this kind of chronic buzz, which I believe is cortisol, probably underlying that. So
interesting. So what I'm hearing you say, Eric Reiners, is that it's not normal to have like a resting heart rate of like 115. Got it. That's
let's see, where's it at right now?
It's at 80 right now, so we're doing good. We're doing really good.
Yeah. No, that's an early sign, because physiologically your body's responding to stress, and there's good stress and there's bad stress, but there's, chronic stress accumulates. It's a lot of smaller stressors over time that accumulates, and you can actually see it physiologically before you see it psychologically.
This is an area that I really would like to kind of dive in and spend some time on. It's really like kind of seeing and recognizing both in your team and in yourself signs of burnout. I think like we talked about just a couple of them now, but let's dive in that a little bit more. Reiners, you want to share some more with us?
Yeah, for me, it's like nowadays, like the tech is so good, you can measure this real time all day long. Like I have a watch and a ring that measure my heart rate and my HRV at all times, my sleep and all that stuff. So you can do it pretty easily, but the question is, do you listen to the data? Just like any SaaS founder, like how do you know what the right decision is without the data? So like what I think the key ones are HRV versus heart rate volatility. If you haven't heard of that, that's a sign of like your level of recovery. And what I used to do during that year where I burned out, I would go home, I'd turn on TV, I would drink a couple glasses of wine with my wife, and I would have a poor night's sleep. And then I'd get up and do it all over again. I wasn't measuring and seeing the signals until I really understood, okay, I should actually be watching this and see what my body's responding to, how my body's responding to the stress. Anyway, I'm getting off the track a little bit, Nate, but the things that I would look for are physiological responses first, and then the psychological aspects. Like if someone's becoming withdrawn, disengaged, if you're feeling less joy from the work, with the stuff that you used to love doing, and now you're coming into work, it's like, I got to do it again. Then that could be an early sign of burnout.
Okay, so I'm going to just double click there for a second. This is one of the questions I was dying to ask you is, how do you distinguish between fatigue and disengagement?
Okay, so, well, this is a sad metric, but 59% of your employees are already disengaged. So that's Gallup State of the Workplace report. So they're probably already disengaged. And so then fatigue, how do we distinguish that? That's typically physical fatigue or mental fatigue or emotional fatigue. So those capacities are drawn down and you're not able to respond. It might show up as irritability. It might show up as physical exhaustion, like you just don't have enough energy to get up and go. And so I think they're a little bit different, but how to distinguish between them? Engagement's really hard. Like every HR people strategy team is trying to figure out how to get engagement going. That might be a worthy topic to dive into a little bit to counter burnout and what drives people. But I think that's a hard one to figure out, Nate. I'm not sure I've got a good answer on that one.
Oh, good. I mean, it's a good topic. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say one thing. I mean, you see it on, we're all in this world of Zoom calls, right? And this just, if you've lived the early stages of this coming into the pandemic, right? These all day on the calls back to back, you could tell the physical exhaustion of everyone, plus all the toll of, family wise and otherwise, and the sense of psychological safety, right? The loss of that. So when I look back at, especially at the team level, it's like there's actually a place where people work hard and are energized by the work. It's like, yeah, we're kicking ass, we're doing a whole bunch of things, we're winning, or even if we're not winning, well, at least we're making progress. So we've innovating, we've created new things, versus this kind of slog where you notice there's like failure to progress on key areas, right? And I think as a leader, there's a time where you actually have to call a timeout, right? And kind of disengage from the whole team from like, okay, let's stop for a moment, pause, and then re-engage in a different dynamic. And I think it really is our role as leaders to do that. I know when to pull that trigger, and then when to go one-on-one and go as a team. And Akash, maybe over to you. I mean, as a leader of as a CEO of a startup, I think you see this. It's almost like, every small inflection can actually have a huge impact on the team's morale. I'm curious as to how that works in companies at your scale.
Yeah. It's so like engagement's interesting at like a smaller company, or I think it applies to like a mid-sized team as well, where it's like, there's a certain level of organic engagement in the work that if you can inspire it is obviously best, right? And sometimes that's easy when things are fresh and new, like a new job or a young company or, whatever it might be, right? A new city, all this type of stuff where you roll promotion, suddenly you have this extra burst of energy for stuff. And I see this a lot, actually. It's like, there's always like this big surge of momentum right at the beginning of like starting something new. And people have a lot of energy for it. And this is maybe even like a interesting topic, but as like a very chronic optimist who has also burned out in the past, it's kind of like you can do it to yourself sometimes. It's not even like the culture or the environment or whatever. It's kind of like my own desire to just like excel, but then like, and like feeling like, yeah, this is gonna go great. This is gonna be fantastic. And then just like pushing harder than I'm actually physically capable of pushing. You know what I mean? And it's, it's like overtraining, overlifting, or something. Use a gym analogy, right? Is like been my experience, and I've seen other people do it too, or like around me, where it's like, you might want to take a break, because I don't think that's sustainable. Like, to like keep doing it like that for like 6 more months, or like even, what I mean, let alone 6 more years.
The fitness analogy, Akash, is so well taken, right? I mean, and Eric, this is something you and I have talked about, is like somehow we keep treating our brain in ways that we would never treat any other muscle group in our body.
Right. Sometimes we're our own worst enemies, right? We're harder on ourselves and push ourselves harder than even our culture or leadership does, right?
100%, right? I mean, we spend, some of you who might be in fitness, right? You typically look at endurance, strength, stability, and the ability for recovery, all these things. It's like, of course, you're not going to exercise the same muscle group day after day after day to exhaustion. You know that innately. And if you don't, you will learn, and the pain will be there, right? The thing with the brain is somehow we keep doing it, right? It's like, okay, day after day, keep exercising like full days with no recovery in between. At least I used to do that. Eric, I'd be interested, again, being in a bit closer to this, and from the science perspective and from the recovery perspective, how would you do this in a busy day? It's not like you can take off for hours at a time to recover.
Yeah, it's interesting. The athlete analogy is really good for the brain too, because you look at a pro athlete, they train, they recover, they train, they recover, and maybe they have an event once a week. If you're a baseball player, maybe more often, but you're training and recovering throughout the week, whereas a corporate professional is expected to perform on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, sometimes Saturday morning, sometimes Sunday, to catch up and get ready for it. And we don't take that time to recover. So the brain needs the same thing. And our recovery activities are actually more rest activities, meaning we're still engaging cognitively. We're watching TV, we're watching the news, we're on social media, we're texting a friend, we're playing video games. Those are technically not recovering your brain resources. So you're frying your dopamine, and you're probably engaging the same visual cortex and emotional centers that you're using on a daily basis at work. So I think practically, Eric, what I do is 3 recovery blocks during the day, 15 to 30 minutes. In fact, my dog just walked in to remind me it's time to go for a walk. It's a great solution if you have the practicality of having a dog. But so for me, it's like just quick little catch-ups during the day. It might be some breath work, it might be some movement, it might be a nutritious snack. But what I find is high achievers have a hard time doing this because they think they need to fill the time with more productivity.
I think there's some guilt associated with that too, at least for me. Like there's times I feel personal guilt stepping away to do things like that, because I'm like, I want to do this, I need to do this yet, I need to do that. And you look at what's on your to-do list, and it's never ending, right? There's always this growing list of things to do. But Reiners, I mean, I think that's something that we should try to maybe practice, right? Putting little slots on our calendar, maybe blocking out some of that time, to your point.
Yeah, I tell people to show up just like you would for a customer. You're showing up for yourself. So don't cancel it. Don't let somebody block it or override it. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm watching the comments here on the chat here. And, there's this thing about, Eric, you brought up hey, have a glass of wine in the evening. A few years back, everyone would think, of course, you're unwinding, right? There's no harm to that. And then realizing just how much it kills your sleep, right? And again, when I start wearing fitness devices, your HRV just and your REM, right? The sort of the part where your brain really is in that dream state and recovery state, just completely flattens, right? And so alcohol is not your friend. I mean, I'll just put it out there, and I'm on no mission, right? But the other thing with the devices, right, is also not your friend for recovery. And Eric, you hinted at this on some people say, oh, I'll just scroll a little bit, watch a couple of videos. Could you go deeper in this? Because when I first heard this, I'm like, man, like that, I am doing this to myself as well. When I'm a few minutes I have for recovery, I'm reaching for the phone or something.
Yeah. So, for example, if let's say you take a walk and listen to a podcast, you want to learn something, you're engaging those same cognitive capacities that you are at work solving deep problems. TV is a little different, and watching passively, like watching a Netflix show, is still engaging the visual cortex. So you're not completely resting the brain. You're engaging parts of the brain, and it might have some interesting norepinephrine hooks that are causing your curiosity to spike to get you to watch longer. Almost every good Netflix show will have a norepinephrine hook in the first 2 minutes or so. And what you're doing is just you're leveraging the same neurochemicals that you need for deep problem solving and deep work. So it's not restful or recovering as it would be to go outside and look at a tree or to walk without a podcast. That's much more, that's an active recovery activity instead of a restful activity, if that makes sense.
Disconnecting more is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, from information, because in knowledge works especially, we're just overloaded with information. So our working memory is clogged up. We have cognitive load, which is your working memory is just overwhelmed, and it feels like it's hard to make decisions. It's hard to like process new information. And so you just have to be, if you're feeling that, it's good to just write everything down in your brain, go for a walk, get it out of your head and go for a walk. That's a nice intervention that can help.
That's interesting. I'm drawing this analogy with like kind of clearing your RAM, you know what I mean, or something like that on your machine. And like it sounds similar. And I always tell everyone on my team, like everyone go take a walk. Like I told Nate this a million times. He never does it. You took a walk this morning though. You texted
Yes,
me.
I
And I was
did.
like, good job. And so it's interesting. I don't take the advice though myself. Like genuinely, I don't know when's the last time I took a walk, like genuinely in the middle of the day, like and just like disconnected myself. And it's like, it's one of these things where I think we have to hold ourselves accountable to our own like well-being sometimes. And like, that's the hardest part. If like, especially if you think like, I'm not doing my job or I'm not like, I'm not meeting my responsibilities, people are counting on me, et cetera. Like these types of feelings of guilt, as you put it, Nate, right? Where you're like, oh, but I'm carrying like a big load. I'm like, and I think it's going to apply to leaders as well, right? You're like carrying a team and you want them all to win and win with you. And it becomes really hard to just say like, but if I don't walk away from the desk right now or stop thinking about this stuff right now or stop trying to learn more, like, then I'm actually going to do them a disservice in the long run. And like, that is a hard connection to like see full cycle, if that makes sense, without actually burning out, which is obviously
intellectually, you know it to be true. However, you still engage in the same behavior.
Right.
And I wonder, Kosh, do you put that pressure? Do you have people telling you that you have to?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Yeah.
Driven,
Just imagine if my wife heard me say that, she'd be like, I never asked you to do anything.
Yeah.
You know what? She's like, I keep telling you to stop doing this startup stuff. No, I'm just kidding. Stressing you out. No, I'm just kidding. She wouldn't say that either. But no, she's extremely supportive. But no one's pressuring me like that, But it is just like that. A little bit of a motor. And so, but sometimes people are, and I think for other folks, they do have that potential sense of responsibility. I know a lot of like first generation immigrants, for example, they want to like send money back home and things like that. And like, they feel like there's maybe a family that they have to get back to. It's just one example. Everyone has their own life and like responsibilities. People are counting on them. I think that can be a factor too, right? If you're like the breadwinner, which I think a lot of knowledge workers end up being in like a pretty significant capacity, as well.
I asked this question recently in an interview, and it was like, who are you trying to make proud? And, the person answered and said themselves. And, for me, it's the same answer. And I think, kind of going back to what we were saying earlier, we inherently put this extreme amount of pressure on ourselves to perform. But to Akash's point, I think sometimes we're not always great at taking our own advice, and sometimes it's hard for us to lead by example when our team is looking for us to do, like, I want to see Akash go on walks more, right? I'd love that for him.
Yeah. So Reiners, I don't know if you have any advice or special. Yeah. I'm like kind of, how do you change your own programming? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things that I've noticed. And again, this part of it comes from just, knocking in, getting a couple of hard knocks or running into walls. But there's a few things where the noticing the trigger points, right? And for me, for a while, it was the context switching, where you're just barely getting to the end of a task or the end of something that you need to finish, and then you're immediately drawn into the next thing and into the next thing. And so finding the triggers, obviously, in a world where you're in support or you're in customer success and so on, you have to be responsive. It's just part of the job. But being able to compartmentalize some of these things, right? And decide that you're just for that block of 90 minutes or what it is, only going to, you're just going to focus on this, right? And either delegate or have somebody have your back while you're 100% focused on a set of tasks. And then putting these blocks somewhere in your week, knowing that at some other times you just need to be in the flow of just responding to requests, and then task bursting at that point, those things, and then you can go back into deep work, right? So being able to frankly fight back, right? Some of the context switching and some of the triggers, that cycle of like overcompensating on one side or the other. So I'll pause here. I mean, there's a few other things, but
there's a bunch of good stuff.
It's those triggers.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, for me, it's like the sign that you have an endless pile of work is a really good sign. You're in the right market. Your products are got product market fit, and you've got customers, you got revenue. That's a great sign. And the pile of work is always going to get bigger no matter what.
Yes.
And that's like a psychological trick I use to say that's a good thing to have a big backlog of tasks to do. What I find is like if I'm not blocking out at least 90 minutes a day for deep work, I get behind. And in cybersecurity, we used to call it the hamster wheel of pain. You never got off the hamster wheel because alerts and incidents were always coming in. And you never get a chance to step outside and look at the wheel and say, do we even need this thing anyway? Like, can we reinvent this process or this customer experience to be even better and stop the hamster wheel altogether? So it's really hard to balance that if you're a knowledge worker, especially customer facing. Your schedule is not really your own. So, but if you can find and get some air cover, like you said, Eric, to get 90 minutes a day, maybe that gives you the opportunity to kind of fix some of those systemic things that might be happening.
Yes.
And another thing I put out there is the fact that at some point you look at yourself in the mirror and it's like, hey, I own this. Regardless of how much I want to tell myself that this is all these things and they all need to be done, in the end, I am the ultimate owner of my schedule and what I say yes and what I say no to. And at some point you have to take ownership. It's very hard to hear as a message. What do you mean? It's like I've got all these constraints and plus, not even counting what's happening at home and so on. And I was like, actually, you do. And until you come to that realization, it's like I am doing it to myself in these ways, and I'm putting myself in these situations. I think there's very little I can change until you've made that realization, and then you've started putting in place those triggers, which is first step really to identify them and then dealing with them one by one, right? So again, I know I'm just maybe oversharing here, but at some point I realized that sleep was going to be a priority, and whatever got in the way of that would actually have to go, right? So that glass of wine, as much as I love it, would have to go, and that's it, right? And the same with some other things, right? You realize just like the late dinners even are, now a thing of the past, whatever it is, right? Those things I think at some point you realize sleep is just so much of a multiplier effect on the rest of your day, good or bad. So I'll pause here, and then it goes on, right, with your fitness and realizing that your health is really kind of has to be prioritized.
Yes. This is such an interesting. I didn't mean to cut you off at all. But this is such an interesting topic I feel like we're in a place that I want to comment on. Is like there's this. I think you've probably heard this term before, like the super stimuli. Where it's like the things that are they're like engineered to really like be unavoidably entertaining, right? It's like the doom scrolling of like all the attention-based algorithms and stuff, right? There's a variety of other things that are more biological, right? Like addictive substances and all kinds of things like that, right? That also fall into this like super stimuli category. And it's like you could see how that is almost a crutch, right? People get addicted to food, they get addicted to doom scrolling, they get addicted to whatever it might be, and it play at the jeopardy of their own health long term, and it's all to actually support this burnout like behavior, right? That's not sustainable, and it's like to keep their mental to not feel like they're. You get what I'm saying. What I'm trying to say is that in order to feel like happy or feel satisfied with how much they're pushing themselves, they succumb to like these other like quick bursts of like easy like happiness, easy satisfaction in the moment type of like instant gratification, right, is the word I was looking for.
Mhm.
And I think it's really hard to disengage, and actually maybe that is also a sign of like, hey, maybe I'm burning out because I find myself just like being drawn more and more to doom scrolling, or
Mhm.
being drawn more and more to like whatever it might be, just like eating terrible foods in the middle of the, way after dinner time or something, you know what I mean? Just like I can't stop myself from just eating a pint of ice cream at 1 a.m. You know what I
Ice
mean?
cream's all right, Akash.
Pint of ice. Okay, there's nothing wrong with eating a pint of ice cream.
Yeah,
Don't
exactly.
That
Well, the
we
whole
draw
pint,
the
I mean,
line at ice cream.
right. That's a
A glass
boundary.
of wine is terrible. Doom scrolling is
ice cream is
apples,
fine.
but
It's
ice
a
cream is
performance
totally
enhancer.
fine.
Right. It also depends what kind of ice cream we're talking, but that's for and that's a future fireside chat. No, I think
No. But what I was really trying to say is just like, it's like a crutch, and like maybe identifying these crutches for happiness, right? Where like, wait, why can't I find happiness in just taking a long stroll, or why can't I like enjoy just going to sleep early and having like a restful night of sleep? It's like maybe there's something else going on that's like, causing this like this forced balance in a sense, where I'm forced to rely and crutch on these super stimuli or something. If that makes sense. Yeah. Sorry, Nate, you were about to say something. Yeah.
No, I was just wanted to tag along to what you're saying. And I think it's interesting because it actually dovetails really nicely into something I was thinking about. Just wanted to throw it out there and ask. I actually would love to hear from all three of you in this capacity, both your own kind of personal experience and then like what you would suggest for others. But what are your personal practices or boundaries that allow you or enable you to have a sustained like high output and performance over time? That also kind of tempers that, right? So you're not burning out. And we touched on it a little bit, but I kind of want to hear a little bit more about that. So, you want to start with you or Reiner? It's a toss up.
Got a cool comment from Austin too. We can come back to, but yeah, go ahead, Steph.
Yeah, I'll get started. I mean, it's a combination of things, right? I mean, we've talked a lot about it's called self-care, or just like watching yourself, not getting to some of these mode and awareness. Honestly, I think there's, actually, so I'm the kind of person that I won't know the limit until I crossed it, right? And but the staying in touch with those signals, and learning from them, right, is key. So I'll put that aside for a moment because I think we've touched a lot on this. But I don't want to obfuscate I don't want to live in sort of this protected box of cotton where I'm not risking myself out there, right? And so part of what I do outside of work is putting myself in doing hard things, because it puts me in these conditions where I find myself in a condition, right? Let's say right before a call with a customer, and something went wrong with the deck, and suddenly your stress just goes way up, and you're like, this is doomed, right? And how you respond in that moment, you will find very similar in ways that you responded when, I don't know, something wrong went with some equipment on some hike or something. And now you have like the hike went from being a nice stroll in the mountain to being, okay, we have a situation, right? We actually got to deal with this. So the more you get to do some of these things in let's call it, in a way where you put yourself in those situations yourself, the more you train yourself to respond to this. And again, I don't necessarily, take risky things in order to be a better performer. It's part of what I do, because it also is a way. So I do endurance workouts that are typically outside, right? And this is my way of putting myself and pushing the limits and knowing when to feel how I feel when either stress or exhaustion is coming up. So I'll pause here. There's some other things, but that's that's things that I've learned, frankly, out of habit. It was my go-to at some point. Is like, you know what? I know I need to go for that run, because that's also a way for me to just reset the whole emotional and brain, the sort of the voice in the head that you at some point gotta quiet down.
That's awesome.
Eric, over to you.
Special, by the way, is not bragging enough because he does these crazy endurance events, multi-day adventure races through the mountains. So your physiology really well. You can feel your heart rate. Like I find that athletes are pretty good at this. And if you can apply that to knowledge work, like how am I feeling right now? Where am I? Do a body scan and quickly. So I do that once in a while, Nate, to say, where am I? Do I need some water? Do I need some food? Do I need to move my body? What's my body asking me and telling me? I'll get kind of practical here. Is that okay on some?
Yeah, that's
okay. Awesome.
Okay. For me, if I don't get a 90-minute flow block, which I talked about earlier, like I can do a lot of tactical stuff, but I've aligned my calendar such that I'm a morning person. So I get up and I do one flow block in the morning. Then I try to get another one, and that's a great day. If I have 2 of those, that's awesome. And then I do client meetings and I do administrative stuff in the afternoon. And then I work out at night or in the afternoon, which I've found out works way better for me because I'm not wasting those early morning hours. Another thing is like sprinkling in those active recovery during the day. So I'm just observing, seeing what's happening, measuring, looking at my heart rate, stuff like that. And then walking away from the work. What I would love to tap into this special, which is, I think you and I talked about this before, which is like, what makes you feel like you have electricity in your veins? And Akash, you mentioned people that just get so fired up about the work that they just don't stop working. And it's really, there's a ton of great research on this. Decky and Ryan from the early 2000s. It's they need curiosity. You need curiosity, passion, purpose, autonomy, and mastery. When you line those 5 up, you feel like you have electricity in your veins. Now, it's a little bit dangerous because it's neurobiologically very expensive to stay in that state for a long period of time. So founders can burn out because they're so excited about the problem and they're hiring a team and they're solving this massive problem that they forget that they need to exit a little bit, recover that neurobiology, and come back in. And so that's a really interesting thing. And there's an athletic aspect to that from a physical capacity, but from a cognitive and emotional capacity, when you're tapping on firing on all 5 of those cylinders. So if you're a leader, you got to give your team autonomy, give them the mission and let them figure out how to get there and how long it's going to take. If you're not assigning things that they're curious about, they might lose interest, because you can do all kinds of extrinsic motivators like bonuses and, salary and quotas and all these things, but they only last about 90 days. But intrinsic motivation, those 5 will power people for months and years. And the trick is not to burn out while you're doing it. But it's the key to tapping into engagement, I believe.
Yes. Cool. What were those 5 again? Curiosity. What was that? And
passion, which is multiple curiosities combining together. And then you have purpose, which is doing something bigger than yourself with other people.
Okay.
And then autonomy and mastery.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Very cool. And that's help you. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Nate. Eric, I mean, this is, you've brought these up, and by the way, Akash, I was just like, he was like, okay, which one? And order. But
yeah, I need to take notes too.
There's something profound there in each of these where you also need to show up as an individual, right? No one can completely be the person who's going to bring you mastery, right? You have to show up and want to learn. And the same for curiosity. You could look at the same job, the exact same job, as a technical salesperson and be completely fired up and excited about, and so excited that and then you could be also in the soul crushing work of doing the same demo over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And so part of my message is like, you actually look at each one of these things, the mastery, the autonomy, the curiosity, the passion, the purpose, and you actually have to show up and realize there's a column there that has your name on it. Right?
Yeah, that's good.
And so what do I need to do to show up there? Of course, the environment matters, right? And I think we as leaders have the duty to provide the environment in which there's enough of all these things to grab, right? So
that's especially, I couldn't have asked you to set me up better for my next question. Really appreciate that. I'm glad we're on the same wavelength here. So, and Reiners, I'm going to pose this one to you first. How can we as leaders create a culture that prioritizes the health and wellness of our teams? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, really interesting question. Yeah, we talked a lot about the individual's response to stress and burnout, but a lot of this is driven by cultural and organizational challenges, let's say. One is if your priorities are changing all the time, that's really disruptive to a sense of achievement, which is a core element of burnout. So in a startup, you have to change and pivot often, but you need at least some time to let the idea bake and test the hypothesis that you have. There's also this busyness culture, which I find if people equate value to busyness and pseudo productivity. So if you're a leader and you're measuring what time people come to the office and how busy they look, that's what Cal Newport calls pseudo productivity. What we want to be measuring is output, meaning, are we winning the deal, or are we shipping the product? Are we getting product market fit, things like that? And if you can do that in 90 minutes and go home, I mean, that's awesome, right? That's if you could do that. And if you get into deep flow, you can do a day's worth of work in 90 minutes. I got tons of evidence on that. And then do you need to do another 8 hours of work that day? Maybe not. But it's very hard in the corporate culture to do this because we don't create space for our teams. We expect them to operate on, 3 or 4 projects simultaneously. When I think finding, and Deep Work is a great book on this, but doing fewer things with higher quality increases throughput, which is very counterintuitive. But if you do fewer things and have your team assigned to fewer things, they'll get more done, and your output will be higher. So that's one of the things, like as leaders, we just got to worry about distractions. It's easy to slack somebody in the middle of their peak performance hours. Let's say they're an early bird and you slack them at 9 a.m. and say, hey, can you get an answer to this for me? That might just have spent 30 hours of their peak or 30 minutes of their peak productivity time to answer that question because of the context switching. So those are some of the things I see. I see a lot of busyness, way too many meetings, not enough time for deep work, and then revolving priorities that are kind of changing with the wind a little bit.
So interesting, because I feel like, and so this is another question, like how would an individual that's like in a setting like that, right? And like this applies maybe less to startups where like the founders can be easily influenced and like, we're all like a very tight and all that, but maybe at like a larger company, right? You're part of like a corporate culture that like spans many layers of leadership. And maybe it's true even at a smaller company, but how does an individual influence their leader into like remediating a bad culture? Or is there only like avenue to like, leave such a culture if like they're truly kind of, being pushed into a highly reactive, constant interruption, like too many projects, too much time wasting, like just guaranteed place for failure, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, one way that this gets there is, actually, in my experience, is having the high trust culture. And we can talk about what that is, right? But the high trust, high performance, duality, where if you have too much of the trust thing, is everyone's like, oh, it's great, group hug, right? And you're like, well, wait, did we actually achieve something? And the opposite, of course, right? Which is like performance at all costs, and then people follow left and right. The trust piece, back to your point, Akash, I think, is knowing that someone in your team can come to you as a leader and say, hey, this isn't okay, right? I mean, I'm not sure if you're seeing the same thing I'm seeing, but here's, being able to open and know that, this is a conversation that's going to be welcome as opposed to met with either a closed door or even worse, retaliation, right? So I spent some time with my teams typically defining trust, because you might say, okay, what does that mean? Just having a group dinner, or I'm like, actually, I went into some depth with this. It's like, there's the clarity of intent. Are you clear in your intentions? And are these clear to the team? And then there's what you say and what you do as a leader. Everyone's watching, like, yeah, Eric says this, but did we see the doing and the saying being aligned? And then it's, are we having an impact as a team? Because you could have all the best intentions and say all these things and still work very hard. And if the team's seeing that we're not getting to the impact, at some point you lose them. But that trust, right, and the feedback loops, and knowing that you're going to fall off at some point, and but being able to talk about it, that's the part that I think gets us out of trouble when there's either burnout issues or any other misalignments.
I love that.
Yeah, it's easier in a smaller team, I think, right? But,
yes,
but
I think so too.
Levels you realize there's some loss in translation at so many levels.
Right,
Eric,
right.
I don't have some thoughts there on that as well. The trust part, right, is it's foundational.
Yeah, you nailed the formula, Special. It's it's also your self-centeredness. If you show up as self-centered, then your trust goes down. So if you're team-centered, it goes up with your peers. That's a hard question, Akash. I haven't figured this out. I used to, as a CIO, 90% I did the math, actually. I did the data. I got the data and said 90% of my team is allocated on existing projects that we prioritized 1, 2, 3 years ago. And when my CEO would ask for, a new investment, let's say in AI, every CIO is asking, what are we doing about AI this week? And so I would say, here's what we're working on. And it would be a trade-off discussion. Like, what should we pause currently? Because I can maybe spin 1 or 2 people out and have them kind of look into it, do some exploratory research. But we're not going to actually build any code, write any code until we prioritize and deprioritize something else. So I don't know if I was ever that successful with it because CEO, sorry, Akash, you always won everything. I don't know.
Well, yeah.
You always
I
won.
won't disagree. But I try to be reasonable.
Yeah, but a trade-off discussion, like what's really, really important here? What is the number one thing? And typically a team of 50 people can do 3 or 4 things, 3 or 4 major projects, but yeah.
It's interesting. This trust piece, it makes sense, right? It's just like, do you feel like you trust the people that you work with? And like that might be foundationally the most important question you could ask. Can you tell them the truth about how you're feeling without that fear of retaliation or being used against you and so on? And if you don't feel like that, like it would be, no matter how slow the search is, probably worth searching, for somewhere else to be. Yeah.
There's a good test of this. If you can give the boss bad news without repercussion, that's a pretty good test. You mentioned psychological safety earlier, Special. That's a pretty good test. So ask yourself as a leader, like, when my team brings me bad news, do I celebrate it, or do I, ask who did it, what happened, that kind of thing.
Yes. Austin had this question. I think, Nate, you pulled it up. It's very interesting question. I wouldn't have thought about it. For those that don't know, Austin is a co-founder at Opine, actually. So he's here to learn, I guess. What's up, man? I'll just read it out loud. How is the expectation and viability around concurrent work streams changing with the introduction of AI tooling? Right. So basically, Austin's asking, can I ask the software engineers to do more because they have AI coding assistants now? I'm just kidding.
Exactly what he's asking.
Just joking. We're messing with him. But seriously, I think it's a great question, right? Because we are all being asked to do more with less now, right? That doesn't matter where you work, to your exact point, Reiners. And it is because of like AI as like a tool that's supposed to help us do more with less.
Yeah.
But is it actually like helpful in the context of, productivity and burning out and these other things of that nature? Like, can it be a boon in alleviating like mental burden by taking things on successfully? Does it just depend on the quality of the AI? I'm curious if you have an opinion, but I could see it going both ways. So
yeah. Personally, I find that like vibe coding is really exciting and fun for the first 80%. And then you have to go fix all the bugs and like understand actually what was built. And you still do engineering work. So I'm an engineer at heart, and so if you still have to do this really deep thinking to prompt the AI really, really well to get a good outcome in the first place. So you're doing a bunch of deep work to get started. And I don't know that it definitely makes us more productive and efficient, but there's this whole thing where it goes off and works. And what do? You watch YouTube while it's doing it. So are you going
what are you doing with the, I see what you're saying. What do you do with the freedom?
Yeah. So I don't know if it increases productivity overall for the enterprise. The results are kind of mixed right now, unless you've built your own machine learning and data pipelines and all the great stuff that you have to build to make it production ready. I think it's not yet realized in the enterprise, if that makes sense. I hope it is, but right now it's I think creating more work for us, actually.
It's interesting. From a startup perspective, it's definitely extremely value added. And I think what the distinction I'm hearing is like, it's cultural, basically, right? It's like, if you are using that like AI tooling to just go in and like numb your brain because you're culturally already kind of burned out anyway, it's basically just causing more problems and also probably not helping the individual either deal with their situation. But yeah, so it's kind of just, it's another tool, right? It's just another tool. How do you use it? It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think it's how you use it. Yeah, I'm not like a naysayer on it. I think it's very promising and it's amazingly productive and for me as an entrepreneur. But I think there's just cautionary things about how you use it.
Yes.
Because you can put out subpar work, I guess.
Absolutely.
If you drop your quality bar, it can be a little dangerous.
Right. Yeah, 100%.
A couple of observations here. One was a quote that I heard recently. I thought nailed it. Was that AI is not going to take your job. Someone using AI is going to take your job if they use it well. Which I think, and again, may not be that way for forever. But the point of like someone becoming very apt at using AI and doing the right work with it, right? The other thing that I've observed is at least my observation is like if someone's sending me an obviously AI generated email or something, I'm like, come on, like, don't give me a reading assignment of the crappy prompt you put out there. And it loses so much authenticity and so much because you can recognize it. AI style is by now like well identifiable. And so I do want to know that people still putting the work of like, hey, big, anyways, we filter a lot of this. So I think we might lose authenticity in the communication when it's obviously AI. I've seen email threads where both sides are actually having AI respond to each other and be like, you guys are just going nowhere with this. Either way, the point being, I see still so much work to do to see how it is integrated in the daily work. And that's a fascinating area of growth, I think, for it's like, how is this changing the work, the work environment we live in?
Yes, there's a lot of opportunity. It's interesting. Sorry, Nate, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna push us along. I know we have a few more minutes. So I wanted to ask another question here. Really, just again, sorry, Specio, I'm picking on Reiners quite a bit here, but for me, like, and I know there's some new leaders like in the who are watching this. What advice would you give them to help them sustain performance from day one? So it's not just we're not hitting this massive peak at first and then like we crash. How do we like perform at a high level at a more sustainable pace?
Individually, Nate, like as a incoming leader, okay, super excited about a new role. You're jumping in. First 90 days are awesome. I think we've covered quite a few of the protocols and stuff, but I think like getting to know the people and engaging in the work. Like for me, I try to be detached and engaged at the same time. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but like being detached from the outcome, but super absorbed by the work. And like getting excited about the problem, because that's gonna fuel you for, especially as if you're in a startup, especially, you got to work on these hard problems and you're wearing a lot of hats and doing a lot of things. You need something that's intrinsically motivating. So how can you learn from it? How can you develop skills? How can you grow and do it at a sustainable pace? I guess the advice I have, it should be fun. It should be effortful and fun at the same time. I don't have a great answer. Yeah.
No, I think that is a great answer. And at least inspires some thought for me. Because I do think that at least folks that have been on my teams in the past, and I definitely haven't led orgs as large as the two of you, but 20, 30 person size teams have felt that they're being asked to produce a sustainable amount of output. But then I know that organizationally in the broader org, people have always viewed my teams as like winning teams. That team gets stuff done. And so I would say like one thing that stood out that resonated amongst what you guys said, I don't think I would have had this answer prior to this conversation even, is just like this really is that kind of lead by example, like they're looking to you type of mindset where it's just like, how do you treat yourself? How do you get your own work done? How do you treat others in the team? And I think it's about kind of finding that balance between, I think Eric Specio, you said this, like not just being like, oh, we're all just fake kumbaya, just like, yeah, everyone's like, whatever happens, happens, and no one's really taking things seriously, but really like driving towards outcomes, high trust, giving people that like accountability or agency, or I think autonomy is the word used, Reiners. So it's like, I know you're going to go get this thing done. And like, I trust you to go get it done. Let's work together if you're feeling blocked, and like just working through blockers and getting things done and not focusing so much on, hey, what are you doing this very like hour that I expected to see you like green on Slack or something, you know what I mean? And like, where did you go or whatever? Like that type of stuff is just like very low trust, very like disenfranchising, and kind of like, just makes people not want to work for you, right? And so anyway, just like very tactical things, I guess, but it's like trust the people you've hired, trust the people on your team until they prove otherwise, right? And yeah,
I would agree. I think having led large marketing teams in the past, one of the things that I've always said is like, don't try to, when you come on board, there's going to be a lot asked of you, and there's going to be a lot of eyes that want to see like the value you're adding immediately to the team, to the organization. don't try to cram everything in all at once. Like try to figure out like what's important to tackle first. And like Akash has like said this to me countless times, and it's something I'm still working on, which is prioritize ruthlessly.
Yeah.
And I wish I would have had that advice years ago, because I would have loved to have given that to, my team. But I think, we need to do that. We need to kind of constantly challenge ourselves. What truly is a priority today, and what can we push out, so we're not just trying to cram everything in the first like 90 days and just look like a rock star and then crash, later on. So yeah.
Special, what about you? Curious. You definitely have a perspective here.
Well, it's hard to encapsulate this, right? I just go with we've already named a lot of those key factors, but if I had to go back on some of these things, it's back to, I think, some of the stuff that Eric mentioned, right? It's really around you can recognize the situations, the type of work, the people that drain you versus the equivalent of things that energize you, and it when you feel it, right? It's right there. Of course, again, I have this theme. It's like you have to show up in the right mindset, but day after day after day, I think you get to recognize this, and I think knowing to disengage those dynamics is a huge part of winning, right? And then all the rest, you can put in place. There are tactics to get done, but that part is like, is your heart in the fight, and do you enjoy it? Because I think we all at some point enjoy exerting effort to get to an outcome of some kind. Whatever that outcome is for you is might be personal. So
Yes.
it's the passion thing, it's the curiosity, it's the energizing nature of work that you have to seek, and don't compromise on that.
Yeah, love that. So I want to just pose one more question, and then we'll do takeaways, and then we'll put this thing, to bed here. But, Reiners, again, leading in with you, how do you think the conversation around burnout in the workplace is going to evolve over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I like this. Gen Z is already rejecting it. This is the current way of working, which I think is very promising. And I think organizations will start to realize that you have to have space for your employees to do deep work. If we're going to solve these hard problems in front of us, you have to create the culture of that. So I think that's going to change, and the metrics and the research is there already. I hope we listen to it.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, great. And then I'm going to throw this out to the group. Anything that we didn't discuss today that you think it's important that we at least mention or talk about before we close out our session?
There was a good question. One is, can I get our CEO to do more CEO things? For you, Akash.
I paid Austin to ask that question, so no.
Oh, that's an insider. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. I love that. I think one thing from me might be, if you are feeling like, let's say you listen to this today and you realize like, maybe I am burned out. I think it's really important to like just say that you should talk to someone that cares about you and your well-being about it sooner rather than later. Just someone you trust, someone that cares about you. I think that's just worth calling out. So yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Specio or Reiners, anything else that you want to close us out with on this topic?
No, I think it's been a great conversation. I appreciate everyone here. And Akash, I would reinforce just your statement of like being out there, people recognizing those signs and seeking help, even beyond their close ones. Sometimes it's actually harder. So go seek some help. And there's plenty of resources out there, right? And Eric, I'm sure we could put a list to help this team here.
Yes. And it'd be remiss if I didn't sign off and thank both of you, Special and Reiners, for spending this time and being vulnerable with our audience and sharing so much. And really, that doesn't come easily. And I think it's very genuinely, there were some comments in there thanking of you for the insights and so on, because this is a topic that doesn't get discussed much, and it's hard to get like such a high level perspective and like an open perspective as you've both provided today. So thank you for that again. And definitely, I think Reiners, would be great if you could tell us a little bit about Be Well as well, if you are so willing or if you so want to.
Yeah, sure.
But,
so you can find me on LinkedIn, posting most days. You can find me at bewellmind.org and on Substack. So I talk about these topics all the time.
Awesome. That's great. All right,
Thanks.
cool.
Well, everyone, thank you for again, to our guests. I'm just repeat what Akash said. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk about this topic. To everyone who joined us today or will be watching the replay of this, thank you for taking the time to watch it. And again, as Akash said, find someone to talk to about this if you are feeling some of those symptoms and signs. It's really important. I'm really excited that we had this conversation today. I'm sure it meant a lot to a lot of people who have watched this or will be watching this. Until next time, we will see you soon. Take care, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.